everyone. I'm Yasmin Vasugian in for Allison Morris. You're watching NBC News Now. Here is what's happening.
We see clear signs of momentum, and we were quite encouraged by the letter, yesterday's letter signed by 11 Republicans and 11 Democrats, showing positive signs about being able to go forward soon. And the president is, of course, eager to deliver these economic benefits to Americans in red states and blue states that they've long been waiting for.
Seeing momentum, the White House has high hopes that a debate on the bipartisan infrastructure bill is coming. What more we're hearing from the White House? And fired the director of the Tokyo Olympics opening ceremony, ousted over an insensitive joke that he made during a comedy show back in 1998. We're going to have the latest from Tokyo.
This was completely unprecedented. And it's a result of what we keep calling a perfect storm of factors affecting the Cuban people.
Cubans on the front lines demanding change in the communist country. We have a preview of tonight's Fight for Freedom special right here on NBC News Now. We start today, though, with the rocky road, of course, to infrastructure. That's where we find NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli, who's joining me now. Mike, great to see you this afternoon. Thanks for joining us on this. As we well know, the president, the vice president meeting with union and business leaders on this bipartisan infrastructure framework just one day, of course, after the first procedural vote failed in the Senate. Talk us through, Mike, who's in the room with them, and is the White House at this point still confident they can get something done?
Well, Yasmin, the White House hasn't said who's going to be part of this meeting specifically, but it is an interesting pairing, isn't it? We don't often talk about union members, labor leaders, and business executives in the same room. But this is a pairing that the White House and the Biden campaign and the transition before it really loved to bring together to try to make the argument, as it has throughout this process, that what the president is talking about here, what he's proposing with both some of the elements of the bipartisan infrastructure deal, but also some of that American Families Plan that in that reconciliation measure are popular with both parties, both traditional constituencies, in a way that we don't typically see in Washington. And so as we saw the failed test vote yesterday in the Senate, the White House has really been reacting with a collective shrug, downplaying the significance and really maintaining that they're confident about where this process is moving forward. We heard that confidence this morning from the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Take a listen to what he had to say.
It feels that things are still headed in a good direction. We're witnessing all of the procedural complexity of the United States Congress, and it can be messy. But over the coming days, feel confident of reaching the point where this can get to the floor. And the sooner this can get to the president's desk for signature, the better. There's a ton of positive bipartisan momentum for this. But as we've seen again and again in Washington, nothing moves in a straight line, and there are going to be more twists and turns to get this done.
Another thing I find interesting here, Yasmin, remember for weeks we were looking at the president who was engaged bringing lawmakers to the White House. He was appearing with that bipartisan group when they announced that deal. We really haven't seen him rolling up his sleeves, getting his hands dirty in terms of that kind of internal Washington game, trying to move this process forward. And instead, I spoke with some White House officials this afternoon who said they really are moving much more into this kind of public pressure campaign. They are supremely confident that the politics here are on their side, and that's more effective to their view of trying to pressure the lawmakers to get to a deal here than anything the president might be doing behind the scenes.
Hey, Mike, let's talk while I have you about COVID funding here. The administration obviously announcing that they're going to increase funding for testing across the country as we are seeing cases spike now with this new Delta variant. At this point, it seems over 80% of the cases, COVID positive cases in this country are from that Delta variant. How much money are we talking here, and where's the focus going to be?
Yeah, the White House announcing that $100 million in funding will go to 2,000 rural health clinics across the country. The goal here is to both increase testing, but also help with those vaccination efforts in these parts of the country where we have seen the vaccination rates lag. But it was so interesting to me as the White House COVID relief team was speaking to reporters earlier today. They talked about the 5 states that have had the highest case rates in the past week also have the highest vaccination rates in the last week, surpassing the national average. I thought that was so interesting because perhaps we talked about all the incentives that have been offered to try to get people vaccinated. Maybe in these states they are really seeing the Delta variant, the increased hospitalizations and cases as a real specter and reason to get vaccinated after all. Maybe that's what's turning the tide here. The other part that was interesting today, the White House was really a little bit on the defensive, as there was a report in the Washington Post that they are maybe reconsidering some of the masking guidance for the public. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki called that report breathless. She said, you should be concerned if members of the federal government here were not talking about these kinds of things at all times. But she insisted there has been no change to this idea that if you are vaccinated, you do not need to wear masks in public.
Hey, Mike, before I let you go, I do want you to touch on something else for us. The president signing a bill to boost funding for the victims of the Crime Act. Explain to us what this program does and what the president actually had to say about it at the signing ceremony.
Yeah, Yasmin, I have to admit, I wasn't familiar with this program. And as the more I learned about it, the more interested I was and why it was running out of money here. This was actually a Reagan-era program that was initiated to basically take money that was collected as part of criminal penalties for domestic abuse, child abuse cases, and then make that funding available to states on a grant basis to make available to clinics, to health centers that provide services for the victims of child abuse, for the victims of domestic abuse. And interestingly, as we saw during the pandemic, unfortunately, a rise in these kinds of incidents, the funding was really running out. And so that was the legislation that the president signed into law to help replenish that funding. And as we know, the Violence Against Women Act, this has been a cause of the president throughout his public career. Take a listen to him talking about the significance of this bill.
This is going to enable us to provide more help and support to victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, trafficking, and other crimes all across America. In order to provide more access and safety and services for victims of gender-based violence, it's long past time to reauthorize and strengthen the protections through the Violence Against Women Act. Please.
It's worth noting at a time when we're often talking about Washington gridlock, this was an overwhelmingly bipartisan piece of legislation, and Republicans joined Democrats at the White House for this signing ceremony today, Yasmin.
And as you noted, Memoli, the timing for this could not be better considering the increase in violence against women during this pandemic and the year-and-a-half lockdown that we all just went through. Mike Memoli for us. Thanks, Mike. Great to see you this afternoon.
Thanks.
We're there to get the truth, not to get Trump. TRU, truth. Trump. That seems to be what the other side is obsessed with. It is my responsibility as Speaker of the House to make sure we get to the truth on this, and we will not let their antics stand in the way of that.
So on Capitol Hill, House Speaker Pelosi vowing that partisan politics will not stop a panel of lawmakers from getting to the bottom of the January 6th attack. Pelosi is looking to fill 5 spots on the Select Committee after rejecting 2 Republicans for the job on Wednesday. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell is joining me with this. Leanne, good to see you. Pelosi given some more details today about that decision, also saying she didn't necessarily disqualify Representative Jim Banks and Jim Jordan because they voted against certifying the 2020 election results. What else are you learning about some of her reasoning here?
Hey, Yasmin, that's right. That's not the reason, she says, because there's another member on that committee appointed by McCarthy, or who was on that committee, who also voted against certifying the election results, and that was Representative Nails. And what she is saying is that it's about, she used the word antics, referring to statements that both members have made about January 6th, about the election, talking about how the election was not legitimate. And there's also been a lot of talk about how Representative Jordan met with the former president in December leading up to January 6th to talk about January 6th. And they're saying that he could be a material witness for the Select Committee. So he is just unable to serve, they say. She also talks about the fact that she's also denying the fact that this is a partisan move. Let's listen to what she said.
These people are going to act up, cause a problem. And people said to me, put them on, and then when they act up, you can take them off. I said, why should we waste time on something as predictable? The Republicans that they put on will have their own point of view. Nobody's saying that it all should be one point of view going on the committee. But it is when statements are ridiculous and fall into the realm of you must be kidding, there's no way that they're going to be on the committee.
Speaker Pelosi also says that it's the Republicans who put them in that position because they voted to object to the creation of an independent commission several months ago, and that's the reason the Select Committee was formed. But Speaker Pelosi is standing by her decision, and it looks like she's going to not have any of McCarthy's choices moving forward.
So what does that mean when it comes, Leanne, to fill in those 5 spots?
So, well, there's a lot of talk now about perhaps adding more Republicans on the committee that Speaker Pelosi chooses and approves of. There is discussions, our sources are saying, about Representative Adam Kinzinger. He's someone who has, come down very harshly against the former president, talks about how the election was not stolen, that it was legitimate, and that January 6th was a very horrible day in our country's history. Speaker Pelosi said that there's a lot of people in her caucus and there's a lot of people who are already serving on the Select Committee who are recommending Adam Kinzinger to serve. And one of those people recommending is Representative Liz Cheney. So we could see another Republican on this committee. It just won't be the choice of Leader McCarthy. Yasmin.
Leanne, before I let you go, want to talk infrastructure for a moment. I was just discussing this with Memily over at the White House. Talk me through where we're at with another procedural vote. Schumer indicating he may want to have another one next week after failing this week.
Yeah, Yasmin, that's right. The vote failed yesterday. There's another opportunity, perhaps next week, if this vote comes up again, just to open debate. This is not a vote on the final package of legislation. We are still waiting for that. And you know what? Late today, we're finding out there is a very, very big complication that Republicans and Democrats have not agreed to in this bipartisan infrastructure bill. And that has to do with the breakdown of how much money is spent on highways compared to how much money is spent on transit, like mass transit. And this is something that Republicans and Democrats have not been able to agree on. And so this could be a major complication moving forward, despite the fact these bipartisan group of members have been insinuating that they are close. But this is a big one to overcome, Yasmin.
Leanne Caldwell, thank you as always. Good to see you.
Yep.
All right, a veteran intelligence officer who helped hunt down Osama bin Laden will lead the CIA task force on the Havana syndrome, the mysterious illness affecting hundreds of American diplomats around the world, and whether they are being targeted in attacks. NBC News chief foreign affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell is joining me now. Andrea, my friend, so good to see you on this.
It's great to see you.
Talk us through some of the details as to what you know. Of course, we know, obviously, the officer's name has not yet been revealed because this officer is undercover. What can you tell us about the background of this officer and the role they have in the task force?
He's going to be heading the task force, he or she, I should point out, because we don't know the identity of this veteran CIA officer. And it's significant that he or she is so experienced, so well regarded, critical for this rigorous hunt for years and years for bin Laden that was successfully achieved. Because this signifies the importance that CIA Director Bill Burns is putting on this whole mystery of the Havana, so-called Havana syndrome, something that started at our embassy in Havana back in 2016, was mysterious. It was the cause for withdrawing all U.S. diplomats, spies, and other personnel from Havana, virtually all. It's just a shell right now with a handful of people. They can't do visas. They can't do other consular work. And that has led to, of course, the situation where relations under President Trump, former President Trump, were downgraded significantly by Mike Pompeo and others at first because of this mystery disease. But we now know so many years later that it is extremely unlikely that Cuba was the cause. It began in Cuba, but we believe Russia is probably the most likely suspect. No hard evidence of that. But Russia back in the 1970s was working on this directed microwave energy kind of radiation that could conceivably be what is being used. The National Academy of Science science group, a panel last year, saying that that is the most likely cause. And this is something that Russia is most experienced in anywhere in the world. The other fact is that it popped up in Russia, in China, all over the world now. And NBC News reported this week that there have been as many as 200 possible cases in every continent except Antarctica. So now the State Department, again, confirming today they are considering sending some diplomats back to Havana if they determine it can be done safely.
All right. Wow. A lot of things we don't know, but a lot of things we do as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, this investigation ongoing. Andrea Mitchell, as always, good to see you, my friend. Thank you.
You too. Thanks, Yasmin.
Welcome back. Let's go to NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boyce. She's following the latest headlines from NBCnews.com. Hi, Simone. Good to see you.
Hey, Yasmin, great to see you as well. Unfortunately, we start with a pretty scary story out of Kentucky where an explosion at a Dippin' Dots facility left 10 people injured. So it happened while a truck was unloading liquid nitrogen, which is that secret ingredient in those Dippin' Dots. The company saying their primary focus is the recovery of the employees who were injured. Now, back in 2019, 4 people were injured in a different building with an explosion that happened there, actually at the same facility. And some sad news from California. A Nevada man was found dead after he didn't return from a weekend hike in Yosemite National Park. 61-year-old Fred Zalakar was actually an experienced endurance athlete, and his death is still under investigation. And former Florida State legendary football coach Bobby Bowden releasing a statement saying he has a terminal medical condition. So the announcement coming after a bad leg infection that left him hospitalized, as well as a battle with COVID-19. Bowden saying, quote, "I've always tried to serve God's purpose for my life on and off the field, and I am prepared for what is to come." Well, China's top health officials rejecting plans from the World Health Organization to dig deeper into the theory that the virus might have leaked from a Chinese lab in Wuhan. Now, the organization already looked into the lab earlier this year and concluded that the coronavirus most likely jumped from animals to humans. However, since then, calls for more transparency have grown louder as some think it's time to revisit the lab leak theory. And Daimler, Mercedes-Benz's parent company, aiming to become fully electric by the year 2030. The German car maker is planning to invest $47 billion over the next 8 years to develop battery-powered vehicles. Their plan includes 8 new production plants by 2025 that will produce electric vehicles only. Yasmin, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Simone. Cases on the rise in North Carolina, the state reporting over 1,400 coronavirus cases yesterday alone. The governor says the Delta variant now accounts for more than 80% of cases there. And officials there, they're sounding the alarm about this uptick in children testing positive for the virus. Children, 15% of infections during the past week were kids 14 and younger, up from 8% just last year. NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns is joining me now from Durham County. Dasha, good to see you. So the uptick in COVID cases among kids is especially notable in Durham County where you are. What is happening right now?
Yeah, Yasmin, here in Durham County, those under the age of 17 make up about a third of cases in the last month. And this is tough timing for schools as they're trying to plan for the fall. And here in Durham County, they've actually had this year-round school program where they just brought kids back to schools like the one behind me here this week, right around the time of this increase in cases. The governor made an announcement yesterday giving new guidance to schools, saying that middle schools and elementary schools should require masks regardless of vaccination status. But he did say that for high schools, for those who are vaccinated, they don't have to wear the mask. Now, this was strongly recommended. But Yasmin, you know, at the end of the day, this all does come down to the local and district level to enforce. And it's not clear at the state level whether or not and how they were planning to enforce this in districts where maybe folks are a little bit more hesitant to mask up. And so these are all of the conversations that, you know, have been flashpoints nationally, and they're going to have to be tackling in the next several weeks as the school year really is coming up here. And as I said, some of these kids are already in classrooms, Yasmin.
Dasha, talk to me about how they're planning on getting more kids vaccinated. Obviously, kids under the age of 12 can't get vaccinated as of yet. The timeline for that, we don't necessarily know when that's going to get approved, but there is kind of a sweet spot between 12 and 14 in which kids can get vaccinated. What are they doing to encourage kids and parents at that to get their kids vaccinated ahead of the school year?
Yeah, I mean, everyone I've been talking to here is thinking about safety and protocols and how to make this work, because it is so important to have kids in the classroom. And I'll note, the governor's announcement around masks. Well, here in Durham County, they're actually requiring masks for high schools as well. So it's going to be masks across the board, at least as of now here. And they say that's because those kids that are not eligible to get vaccinated, but also, Yasmin, because the vaccination rates among kids 12 to 17 that are eligible are quite low in the state, about 24% fully vaccinated. I talked to the county public health director about this. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Our younger students can't get vaccinated, so of course we're continuing with masking. Not every staff member will be vaccinated. Not every older student will be vaccinated. And it is simpler to deal with the inconvenience of wearing a mask than to try to identify whether every single person in the school is vaccinated.
And Yasmin, that was actually the chief communications officer for Durham Public Schools on their decision to require masks across the board. I do want you to hear, though, from the county public health director about how to get more of these kids who are eligible vaccinated. Take a listen.
I'd say the clock is certainly ticking. As far as state trends, we know that the state is seeing a lot of infections in the 0 to 17-year-old age range, and those are our students. So as it stands right now, we certainly want as many people to get vaccinated as possible. We are delighted here in Durham to know that there's a lot of back-to-school campaigns and back-to-school events in which they want to promote vaccinations. We're hopeful that those families who are on the sidelines or procrastinating maybe would probably take the time to get vaccinated.
And Yasmin, at the end of the day, the message from the district is if a 12-year-old who is eligible gets vaccinated, they're helping to protect those younger kids who are not yet eligible. And that's something they're hoping that families will take into account. Yasmin.
Yeah, a lot of parents, me being one of them, certainly worried about sending my kids back to school, especially when they are under the age of which they can get vaccinated. Currently, this thing is not over. That is for sure, as we're hearing from the CDC. Dasha Burns-Forrest, thanks so much. Good to hear from you. So we have an urgent warning from the Surgeon General about vaccine misinformation. It's exploding online. The dangerous false claims putting more pressure on social media companies to stop bad actors from undermining public health efforts as new COVID cases spike among the unvaccinated. NBC News investigative and consumer correspondent Vicky Nguyen takes a look at the problem and what the big tech giants are doing to stop the spread.
An intense push to vaccinate as COVID numbers rise across the country. Vaccine misinformation is also spreading online. On Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we easily found dozens of posts promoting theories the vaccines alter your DNA, diminish fertility, and even make you magnetic. According to multiple public health agencies and doctors, that information is false. It's so bad, the Surgeon General issued a rare formal advisory, usually reserved for warnings on tobacco, drugs, and obesity.
Today, we live in a world where misinformation poses an imminent and insidious threat to our nation's health.
Facebook, which also owns Instagram, fired back in a blog post titled "Moving Past the Finger Pointing," saying, "When we see misinformation about COVID-19 vaccines, we take action against it," citing more than 2 billion people have viewed authoritative information about COVID-19 and vaccines on Facebook. Twitter agreed with the Surgeon General's advisory, tweeting, "As the COVID-19 pandemic evolves around the world, we'll continue to do our part to elevate authoritative health information."
How is it possible that we can all look at the same facts and arrive at radically different conclusions?
Sander van der Linden is a professor of psychology at Cambridge University in England. He studies how falsehoods spread online. He also advises Facebook to help the company debunk misinformation on everything from COVID to climate change.
What did you think of the U.S. Surgeon General's statement.
It was a very strong and important statement. Misinformation about vaccines can harm public health in several ways.
He said that although the social networks have taken significant measures to quash false statements, their algorithms give misinformation more chances to go viral and infect the public.
Finding anti-vaccination groups on Facebook is harder than it used to be, but look what happens when we're on one of these pages. Facebook's formula wants to keep us engaged, so it shows us more related pages with groups that have questionable vaccine information. And a similar experience here on Twitter. When we start on the page of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a prominent vaccine critic, Twitter shows us we might like other profiles with people who are critical of vaccines.
Multiple studies found polarizing posts tend to generate more likes, comments, and shares, which means more people will see these types of posts.
What should they be doing?
Well, one of the things they should be looking into is how to reward people for sharing accurate information.
But he warns social media companies may not be motivated to erase all misinformation.
Because that's the way their business model runs, is they profit off of engagement. And if negative content is what promotes engagement, then that's not going to change. And I want to be part of the solutions as long as it doesn't harm the profitability of the platform.
So what can you do to reduce junk information? Get your news from diverse sources. Don't engage in online debates which can boost engagement and spread misinformation further. Instead, create a new post and share accurate information while addressing the myths.
All right, NBC News senior reporter Ben Collins is following the latest on Facebook's battle against some of this misinformation. He's joining us now. Ben, good to see you. There's so much I want to unpack on this. And first and foremost is the way in which some of these anti-vax groups, they're avoiding detection on social media, going so far as to avoid detection so they can continue to spread this misinformation. How are they doing that?
Yeah, they're changing their names. They are not out there saying to not take the vaccine in groups that say don't take the vaccine. The group names are things like Dance Party or Swim Club. And once you're in the group, you change the vernacular. There's like a legend at the top of the page that says, don't say I got the vaccine, say I went dancing. Or, don't call it Moderna, call it Moana. There are code words now all throughout these pages to make sure these people do not. There's that list right there. You can see, for example, Pfizer, when they bring that up, they talk about pizza in these pages. It's a way to make sure not only are they not caught manually by Facebook censors, they're the bots that automate Facebook that search for anti-vaccine misinformation. They'll never catch this.
So I actually want to read from what Facebook is saying because they're pushing back hard against some critics, Ben, who believe that they're not necessarily doing enough. And they say this, reduce the visibility of more than 167 million pieces of COVID content debunked by our network of fact-checking partners, that Facebook has done this. But I can't help but go back to what Vicky just said in her package in that they don't necessarily have motivation to shut these groups down because it's only doing what they were built to do, what these social media sites were built to do. That being said, by spreading this type of misinformation, it's killing folks.
Yeah, it's really difficult, in part because like debunking people, going to your friends and going under their posts and saying, hey, what you just said is completely wrong. As Vicky points out, that's more engagement. That bumps that up even further into your news feed. And that's what Facebook wants. Facebook wants you, constantly interacting on the platform, getting really angry or really happy or really emotive in some capacity. So the more outrageous stuff that you see, the better off it is. And unfortunately, anti-vaccine conspiracy theories are incredibly outrageous. They're very clickable things. They provide you really simple answers to complex solutions. So that's the issue here, is that this sort of thing sort of fits into what the algorithm would want, sort of what it feeds on. Facebook has to take extraordinary steps to stomp this out. And they have. That's the thing is, Facebook has taken down a lot of stuff and they've, downranked a lot of stuff. But anti-vaxxers will persist. They really believe in this stuff.
Is there a way, Ben, to identify that you're reading something that's not accurate if you don't necessarily know the facts yourself?
Well, there's a lot of ways. Just first of all, from a personal standpoint, just Google it, just look it up. And if something seems way too simple to be true, sometimes it often is just that. Facebook has applied labels and basically shaded over really, very viral, mega viral false claims about COVID-19. The issue is sometimes now anti-vaxxers use that label as sort of like hey, we've been banned. Look at how cool it is. This label is over our thing. That they're hiding the real truth. So that's now what Facebook has to combat. We're on like stage 4 or 5 of this. It's going to get more and more complex.
Ben Collins for us. Thanks so much for this really important reporting. Appreciate it. All right, your vaccine card. It could be in your office drawer, the glove compartment of the car, or maybe that pile of papers on your kitchen counter. But what if you can't find it? NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett shows us what exactly to do.
Keys? Check. Wallet? Got it. Phone? Phew. Vaccine card? Vaccine card. As things get back to normal around the country, places like concert venues, universities, and even some workplaces are requiring you to show proof of vaccination. But if you've been vaccinated for a few months now, you may have misplaced this little 3x4-inch CDC vaccine card.
Jesse on Facebook, I lost my vaccine card. What should I do? That is our #1 question on our frequently asked questions right now.
The CDC says if you've lost your card, your first stop should be contacting the provider of your vaccine, whether that was a local pharmacy or a mega site.
They're not going to give you a new card. Those are held tightly, but they will give you a printout and something that will be valid where you are needing to show your proof.
If you can't contact your vaccine provider directly, maybe because it was a pop-up shop that's no longer there, reach out to your state health department's immunization information system. All of the contact information is organized on the CDC's website. Most states will give you a copy of your immunization records, and since vaccination providers were required to report COVID-19 vaccinations to the state, it should be on the record they give you. Some states have apps or websites where you can access your proof of immunizations pretty quickly, like in California.
The odds are someone's going to misplace their paper CDC card, and the digital COVID-19 vaccine record provides a convenient backup.
But it may take a few business days in other states. If you know your card is nowhere to be found, it's best to start the process sooner rather than later. So if you don't have that card, take a deep breath. You're not throwing away your shot. You just need to take a few extra steps to get that proof.
The bottom line, our daily look at what's going on in the business world and beyond. Weekly jobless claims are out, and the numbers, they're disappointing. 419,000 Americans filed for first-time unemployment benefits just last week, a significant jump from the week before. NBC News senior business correspondent Steph Rule explains why.
Hey there, Yasmin. It's Thursday, so the weekly jobless report is out. 419,000 Americans filed new unemployment claims in the last week. Now, that number is ticking up from where it was a week ago, which is surprising to many because over the last couple of months, since we've become vaccinated and the economy has reopened, we have seen more and more people go back to work and those jobless numbers go down. So why has it gone up in the last week? Well, this one is something special. In a couple states, Michigan and Kentucky, a few major auto plants shut down for several weeks. Now, they do this every year to retool the plant and put it in better shape. And during this period of time, some of their workers are eligible to file for unemployment. That's why we saw the numbers go up. The good news, in a few weeks when the plants reopen, those people will be back on the job. Now, overall, the jobs picture is getting better in this country. And for those without jobs, wages are improving. As employers in all sorts of industries, specifically low-wage jobs, are looking for workers, they're continuing to offer better and more incentives, better pay, more flexibility. That's good news. There has been the argument that because of expanded unemployment benefits tied to COVID, some states believe that people have not gone back to work because they're getting paid so well with their benefits. So we have seen a number of states terminate those benefits early. But the data shows that hasn't brought more people back to work, at least not yet. We are seeing people go back to work at the same pace across many states, and it's taking time because COVID isn't behind us. Many people are still home. Their kids are home, and they've got issues to work out. Over the next few months, we expect these numbers to continue to improve. As for now, the picture is looking good, but we're not back to where we were pre-pandemic, at least not yet.
4 companies agreeing to a settlement to resolve thousands of lawsuits for their role in the epidemic, the opioid epidemic. The price tag, $26 billion.
This is an important step forward to confronting the scourge of addiction across Connecticut and across the country.
NBC News investigative producer Laura Strickler has been following the story for us, and she's joining us now. Laura, great to see you this afternoon. This settlement, it's actually been in the works for quite some time. Break down this major agreement, this major settlement for us.
Yeah, so Yasmin, basically this is a $26 billion settlement between 4 separate companies. You have $5 billion coming from Johnson & Johnson, and the rest are split between 3 drug distributors. I think one thing to highlight about this deal is that it's very bipartisan in an era of, fierce partisanship. This is an agreement that was hashed out by a bipartisan group of state attorneys general from around the country. And it's very significant because these companies, McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, and Cardinal Health, they were the ones that funneled the opioids to communities around the country. They are the middlemen in terms of distributing drugs to pharmacies. And the accusation here is that they weren't paying attention to the extreme amount of opioids that were being distributed to communities around the country. Now they will have to pool their data. They will have to identify any suspicious orders that come up. And this is really critical because we have just last year, 93,000 Americans died from the opioid epidemic. That was a 30,000 person increase over the year before.
Such a huge and troubling number there. Talk to me about where this money is going and how it's going to be distributed. You got a lawyer for some cities and counties calling this settlement a game changer.
Yeah, I think what's really important here is that a lot of these state attorneys general learned from the tobacco settlement from, decades ago, which basically required tobacco companies to pay money to the states. A lot of that money went to things like potholes and infrastructure. This money will go towards abatement. And what that means is it will go towards prevention, treatment, and recovery. And that's clearly what's needed. And that's what these attorneys general want to address.
What are you hearing from the companies on this? What is their response?
So the companies are, Johnson & Johnson has come out saying that they are, very sympathetic to the people who are dealing with the opioid crisis. There is, importantly, there is no admission of guilt by any of the companies in the agreement. But the Tennessee State Attorney General came out and said he thinks there are, 26 billion reasons why the companies thought there was some real wrongdoing here. And certainly, this is not a done deal just yet. A lot of the states have to sign on, cities and counties have to sign on. So we'll have to wait and see. But it is a very strong indication that money is going to be going to those communities soon.
Laura Strickler, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Patria y Vida, Homeland and Life. It is the rallying cry in Cuba as historic protests grow in the communist nation. Tonight, an NBC News Now and Telemundo special takes an in-depth look at the fight for freedom. Here's a preview.
I'm a Cuban American, and I was born and raised in this country. And all of us that were, we don't realize we were born privileged. And in the face of what's happening right now, we realize it more than ever. And it is our duty and it is our right to exercise that freedom of speech for those that can't. Our parents that immigrated to this country, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be the son or the daughter of Cuban immigrants. You just have to be the son and the daughter of immigrants. First generation Hispanic Americans need to understand this is our battle, because if it's your dad's battle, if it's your mom's battle, if it was your grandparents' battle, it is our battle too. It's our duty to honor their sacrifices in a moment like this and speak up about these injustices.
There's been a strong response by the Cuban regime to tamp down whatever may be going on in the streets. Is there a future for the Cuban people? Is there a future for those who want change in the island?
Of course, there is a future, and that future also needs the support of the international community. The Cuban people is demanding human rights, they are demanding freedom, are demanding the end of the dictatorships at the highest possible cost, which is the life. They are making their part. Now, the part of the portion of the Cuban nation that lives outside the island, we have the responsibility to make the world act.
The people have had it. As you know, the people in the streets in Cuba now are not saying, send us money or send us food or send us vaccines, although they need all that, of course, and we should provide that for them. But that's not what they're saying on the street. They're saying, give me my liberty, give me liberty, give me life. Enough with this repressive, oppressive regime. It's a tyranny what's been going on there for now 62 years. And the people have said, that's it, enough.
Do you think it's a moment or is it a movement?
I think it's both. I think it's a movement that's created the moment, and I think it's my feeling that it's not gonna go away.
The culmination of decades-long oppression, poverty, and of course a pandemic now ravaging the island of Cuba. Joining me now, Jose Diaz, Velar, anchor on Telemundo, NBC at Nightly News Saturday, and the host of tonight's special. Jose, so good to see you on this. Thanks for joining us. We really look forward to seeing this special. Seeing somewhat of a preview on it just now. The White House, though, announcing new sanctions against Cuban officials who cracked down on protesters today. The administration has been facing a lot of pressure to take action here. Is this the right first step?
It's a first step. And the sanctions against Alvaro Lopez Miera, the Secretary or Minister of Defense, as well as this paramilitary group that is part of the armed forces of the Cuban regime that has been carrying out these atrocities since the 11th of July. By pointing them out, you're essentially pointing out part of the infrastructure of repression that exists in Cuba. And, you know, Rosa Maria Paya, who we just saw just a second ago, who is a human rights activist, president of Cuba Decide, today, her father, 9 years ago, today, was killed in Cuba. He was a human rights activist in that island. So efforts to ask for freedom have been ongoing for 62 years, but it seems as though no one listened. And now, because of the advent of the internet, people are able to see with their own eyes what we're seeing right here, which is people going out to the streets asking for freedom. And Patria y Vida, you just mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, is a song that's become an anthem inside Cuba, that if you sing that song in Cuba today, you're going to go to jail. The singer, this song was sang by 5 people. By the way, I speak today at 8 o'clock with the author of that song, Patria y Vida, in South Florida. But 2 of the 5 singers sang that song in Cuba for the video. One of them is in jail. The director of the video in Cuba, in jail. The director of the civil rights movement, San Isidro, in Havana, jailed. So just for saying Patria y Vida, people are going to jail. Hundreds of them are going to jail. So as I asked Andy, is it a moment or is it a movement? It may be both. It may be that this is the beginning of something big. 62 years of silence is a lot of silence. And so let's see how, this bears out in the future. But today's statement by President Biden is a step. It's a message. But a lot of people are saying that what they really need is more than a message. The internet is controlled, fully controlled, 100% in Cuba by the Cuban government. They restricted it. They stop it. They make it slow. They eliminate it altogether. They don't want those images to come out, but they're coming out. And we'll talk about that tonight at 8 o'clock. Why is it that people are willing to risk their freedom, living inside of the dictatorship, to film something that could come back and has come back to affect them? Why are they doing it? Because their call for freedom is more important than anything else in their lives.
Jose, it's interesting because it's similar to a story that we've heard around the world under so many oppressive regimes, but Cuba having its own unique story as well. I've actually been to Cuba and seeing kind of what it once was. You can tell in the streets that are now somewhat abandoned in certain areas how vibrant it once was, and now how the doors are shuttered on so many shops and restaurants no longer to remain in business. You spoke about some of the guests that you interviewed for tonight's special to talk about the plight of Cuba, how they got to where they are and where they want to go. Who are we going to hear from?
Well, Giancarlo Canella, who is an actor, singer, and an activist. Enrique Santos, who is the CEO of iHeart Latino, has his nationally syndicated show. We hear from Laz Alonso, who is an actor from the award-winning series The Boys on Netflix. We have Rosa Maria Payá, the activist, Andy Garcia, America, who is a young lady, a model who has taken to the airwaves to talk about what is going on in her country when she was born outside of Cuba. But her blood is very Cuban, and she has been talking about that. You know, you talk about how Havana, when you visited it, you could see what it once was. It just recently celebrated its 500th anniversary, and it looks as though in large part of that city, a bomb has gone off. Well, the bomb is 62 years old, and it's called the Castro regime.
Yeah. An important conversation to have. We're all going to be watching. Thank you for your work, Jose Diaz-Balart.
It's good seeing you.
Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Good to see you as well. You can watch our special, Cuba's Fight for Freedom, tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, streaming right here on NBC News Now. The director of the opening ceremony for the Tokyo Olympics out of a job today, Kentaro Kobayashi, who was also a comedian, fired over a joke that he made back in 1998 about the Holocaust. One person who never seems to disappoint, though, Olympic gymnast Simone Biles. She previewed her Olympic routines at practice, giving the world a sneak peek. NBC News senior national correspondent Tom Yamas is in Tokyo.
Hey, Yasmin, great to be with you. So today in Tokyo, we got our first glimpse at a group that may be Team USA's best chance at winning gold, the U.S. women's gymnastics team. And even though it was just a practice, you can see all these women are fierce competitors.
With just one day to go before the opening ceremony, Simone Biles and Team USA drilling down in practice and giving the world a look behind the scenes. Biles warming up on the uneven bars and on the balance beam, practicing those acrobatic skills and showing off some explosive moves. That beam's width smaller than an iPhone. Biles drawing applause from coaches and fist bumps from fellow teammates. And reminding us with this vault, even though it's a practice run, why she's the GOAT. The session taking place in Tokyo at the brand new Ariake Gymnastics Stadium. Michaela Skinner practicing her floor routine, going airborne with a perfect landing. And Suni Lee showing off her mesmerizing skills on the uneven bars. Team USA also posing for photos along with their coaches, seeming to be in good spirits. Even though one of their own, alternate Kara Aker, now in quarantine after testing positive for COVID. Competition gets underway this Saturday, and excitement is building here and outside the Olympic Stadium, where the opening ceremony is taking place. We've found lines of people taking photos by the Olympic rings.
What are you most excited to see?
Maybe the opening ceremony tomorrow. Yeah, I want to see the performance.
Though most polls in Tokyo show a majority of people in favor of postponing or canceling the games, the fans we spoke to here want to watch the games, but understand the reasoning behind the strict COVID measures.
I wish people can watch it directly, but I think for the current condition, this is the wisest one. The wisest decision. The wisest decision that they made, I guess,
So from that conversation and from having talks with other people throughout Tokyo over the last few weeks that we've been here, people are excited to watch the Olympics. They're just not happy it's in Tokyo because of the rising COVID rates and, of course, this pandemic that never seems to end. So they're definitely going to watch. They just wish it wasn't in their backyard.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.